Case of Brittany Gregory. Brittany Gregory was born on April 1, 1988 in Brick Township and is the youngest of 5 children. Due to her parents' divorce, she had to live with her father but still maintained a close relationship with all of her siblings, especially her older sister Brianna, who is 4 years older than her. Brittany was a model student in school, and her teachers believed that she had the potential to become a scholar. However, her passion and dreams were focused on something completely different. She had an ambition to become a forensic scientist and study evidence at crime scenes. At home, Brittany enjoyed her role as the youngest child in the family. According to her mother, Brittany was spoiled, but she was not vain or arrogant. Brittany was a fan of pop culture, and her idol was none other than the queen of pop, Britney Spears. Her bedroom was decorated with posters of Britney Spears. Aside from music, Brittany enjoys watching cartoons, especially SpongeBob SquarePants. And she can't stop watching TV shows about forensic science, a career she aspires to pursue. Brittany's love for forensic science often brings her closer to her mother. They share a passion for watching TV shows about the subject and often call each other to discuss episodes as they watch them. Brittany, 16, and her 20-year-old sister Brianna live with their father, Joe Dunn, and his girlfriend, Lori Peterson, in a small house near their school. Their house is down the street and near a wooded area. At the time, Brittany was in a 2-year relationship with her 18-year-old boyfriend, John Fitzgerald, a nice guy whose family approved of the relationship, and they were considered the perfect couple. On Sunday, July 11, 2004, Brittany's mother, Deborah, and her sister, Brianna, were visiting her brother and his wife, who had a newborn daughter in the town of South Toms River, 15 miles from their home. That evening, Brittany called her mother on her cell phone at approximately 8:30 p.m. to ask for a ride to John's house. However, Brittany seemed upset. Her mother explained that she was out of town and couldn't drive Brittany, but said that her sister Brianna could be there in about an hour. Brittany agreed to wait for her sister. Approximately 45 minutes after Brittany called, Brianna was free and attempted to call her back. However, her call went unanswered, leading Brianna to assume that Brittany was either asleep or had gone to John's house with someone else. The next morning, when Brianna returned home, she found Brittany was gone, but all of her belongings, including her phone, were still in the house. This seemed unusual, as Brittany rarely left her phone behind and often informed her family of her plans. Brianna contacted Brittany's friends, but none of them knew of her sister's whereabouts. After failing to reach Brittany, Brianna decided to call John. According to John, he last spoke to Brittany on the phone on Sunday morning, and they had not seen or spoken to each other since. Lori Peterson, a family friend who lived with them, said she returned home around 10 p.m. Sunday and did not find Brittany there. Brianna reported her sister missing to the police, sensing that something was wrong. Initially, the police did not believe that Brittany had actually disappeared, thinking that she might have run away or been with friends. However, Brianna explained that she had contacted Brittany's friends and boyfriend, none of whom had any information on her whereabouts. Brianna was convinced that her sister Brittany had not run away from home because she was a diligent student and spent most of her time at the library. Brittany also never left the house without notice, and all of her personal belongings, including her phone and money, were still at home. Initially, the police suspected that Brittany had run away, but after speaking with Brianna, they began a thorough investigation. First, they went to Brittany's house to check her room for clues. They confirmed that her purse, containing her phone, ID, and makeup, was still there, but they did not find anything unusual. The police interviewed everyone who lived in the house and eventually ruled out the possibility that Brittany's relatives were involved in her disappearance. Next, they expanded their search to the surrounding area, checking nearby homes, examining property, and interviewing neighbors. They are looking for potential witnesses who may have seen or heard something suspicious. While searching, officers found that Brittany's house was located at the end of the road, near a wooded area. When they spoke to neighbors, they did not see anything suspicious, except for a woman who claimed to have seen Brittany walking down the road, heading toward the wooded area. Numerous police interviews with her family, neighbor, and teachers revealed that no one had anything bad to say about Brittany. Everyone spoke very highly of her. However, her sister, Brianna, mentioned that Brittany and her boyfriend, John, had been arguing frequently recently, including one on the day she went missing. This argument upset Brittany, and she wanted to visit John that evening to make up. In order to better understand John's relationship with Brittany, the police asked him to come to the police station for questioning. At the station, John reported that his last phone conversation with Brittany took place on Sunday morning. At the time, he was at the beach with friends, which upset Brittany because she was not there. The argument resulted in them not speaking to each other since then. John also revealed that he and Brittany had recently broken up. Although she knew he was dating someone else, Brittany had a hard time accepting the breakup. According to John, he had no plans to see Brittany on the night she went missing and did not know she would come to his house. He attributed the breakup to a rumor that Brittany kissed another guy at a party, which he did not witness. However, this rumor prompted him to end their relationship and start dating someone else. John last saw Brittany on July 10th, the day before she disappeared, when she gave him a letter. In the letter, Brittany expressed her desire to make amends. After receiving permission from John, the police examined the letter, which contained Brittany's apology for her actions and her desire to remain friends with John. John appeared genuinely concerned and worried about Brittany's disappearance. Despite initial suspicions, the police had no evidence linking him to her disappearance. After passing a lie detector test, he was cleared as a suspect. However, John did provide the police with one important detail. He revealed that Brittany often took a shortcut through the woods behind her father's house to visit him. This new information adds complexity to the case, leading police to consider the possibility that Brittany attempted to reach John's house, a mile away, by walking through the woods on the night she disappeared. It was nighttime when Brittany went missing, making it likely that she got lost in the dark woods along the route she had taken. In order to find her, the police launched a search in the woods near her home. However, being in the woods at night is scary and dangerous, and the question of why a young girl would not be afraid to walk through the woods in the dark is puzzling. The search in the woods lasted for 3 days but yielded no results. Just when the investigation seemed to be stalled, the police received information from a woman who claimed to have been in a nearby park the night Brittany went missing. The woman said that she had been with her brother in the quiet, deserted park, with no cars in sight except one, a Chevrolet pickup truck with distinctive wheels that had driven past. The woman had noticed the car and even remembered its license plate number. After verifying the information, the police discovered that the car belonged to Anthony Geiger, 23. To determine if Anthony was involved in Brittany's disappearance, the police began to look into his past. Their findings revealed that Anthony was the ex-boyfriend of Bobby Joe, Brittany's older sister. According to Bobby Joe, they had broken up a month earlier due to Anthony's excessive jealousy, especially his excessive attention to Brittany. She began to suspect that Anthony, 23, had feelings for her younger sister Brittany, which eventually led her to end the relationship with him. Brittany's friends recalled that Anthony often looked at Brittany strangely and tried to flirt with her. During their last meeting at lunch, Anthony tried to flirt with Brittany again. This aroused the police's suspicions, so they brought Anthony in for questioning in connection with Brittany's disappearance. Anthony claimed that he was not in the area on the evening of July 11th until the following day, July 12th, after police had begun searching for Brittany. Although he admitted to being friends with Brittany and seeing her regularly at gatherings, he maintained that they were just friends and denied any attempts to flirt with her. Anthony claimed that he considered Brittany too young for him and only saw her as a friend. According to Anthony, he was at home with his new girlfriend on the evening of July 11th. His girlfriend confirmed his alibi, but because his home was close to Brittany's, police still considered him a suspect. Police returned to examine a letter Brittany had written to John and noticed disturbing signs that she was saying goodbye to her lover, raising concerns that she may have been planning to harm herself after breaking up with her boyfriend. Brittany's parents, however, disagreed with this theory, describing their daughter as intelligent and determined. They believed that Brittany's passion for life and ambitious plans were unlikely to be derailed by a breakup. As the investigation stalled, police turned to the media to gather information from witnesses and enlisted the help of nearby police departments. Brittany's parents also joined the search effort. As they grew increasingly frustrated with waiting and doing nothing, they decided to take action by canvassing the neighborhood, going door to door and asking locals about Brittany. The police returned to the starting point of the investigation, Brittany's home. It was puzzling that she had left her phone behind, especially since she had planned to meet her boyfriend. This led to new questions. Was she kidnapped from her own home? If so, was the perpetrator someone she knew and trusted? During a thorough search of the house, the police found something important in Brittany's room, namely her diary, which contained a handwritten letter. The police considered the contents of the letter to be extremely important because it revealed the truth about Brittany's family relationships, which had been shrouded in secrecy. In the letter, Brittany described her life in detail. She wrote about her friendships, boyfriends, schoolwork, and her difficulties with her family. Specifically, she wrote that she came from a dysfunctional family, that she visited her brother in prison every Sunday, that her mother was a drug addict and abandoned her when she was 9 years old, and that she now lived with her father, with whom she was not very close, and his various girlfriends. Despite acknowledging her own shortcomings and past mistakes, Brittany expressed her determination to break free from the cycle of dysfunctional family life. Her goal was to become a forensic scientist and make a positive impact by helping solve crimes. After reading the letter, the police investigation shifted its focus to Brittany's family, who were not initially considered suspects. Police began investigating each family member and discovered that a male massage parlor, which was actually a front for prostitution, was being operated from their home by Lori Peterson, a friend of Brittany's father. Neighbors knew that Lori did not provide legitimate massages but only intimate services for money, which she openly advertised by handing out business cards in the area. Neighbors also reported that suspicious people often gathered at Brittany's father's home to use illegal drugs. Several men, most of whom Lori did not know, came to use her services. It is possible that one of her clients abducted Brittany from her home. After Brittany went missing, more than 100 police were tasked with identifying everyone who had visited Joe Dunn's home over the past month. A week after Brittany went missing, on July 18th, police made a breakthrough when they arrested a suspect in connection with the murder. However, at the time of the arrest, Brittany's body had not been found, making the news extremely difficult for her family to accept, as they still held out hope that she was still alive. When police released a photo of the suspect, Brittany's mother, Deborah, recognized the man as 38-year-old Jack Fuller, a family friend of 20 years. Jack regularly attended family gatherings and had developed a close relationship with the family over time, to the point where his daughter was engaged to Brittany's brother, who is currently in custody. Her mother, Deborah, was shocked by the news, finding it hard to believe that Jack could be involved in such a crime. The fact that his children were friends with Brittany made the allegations even harder to accept, and the family continued to hold out hope that Brittany was still alive. Jack had a lengthy criminal history, with numerous incidents and arrests over the years. His crimes included breaking into vehicles, homes, and sheds, as well as using and selling drugs. He was known to be aggressive, once threatening someone with a baseball bat and fighting with police during a scuffle. Jack also had a habit of lying to police about his identity, which he did after being arrested for driving under the influence. Court records show that he was arrested more than a dozen times over a 10-year period and had served time in state prison for theft and violating his parole. Neighbors said they feared Jack and often chose not to report his crimes because of threats. He was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison at his most recent trial, but was released about a year before Brittany went missing. Brittany's parents believed Jack might have stolen money or jewelry to buy drugs, but they did not believe he would harm their daughter. However, after Jack was arrested, police revealed how they were able to connect him to Brittany's disappearance. The key piece of evidence began with a phone call to the police station. The caller reported that Jack had confided in him a few days earlier about having back pain after burying a body in sandy soil. According to the caller, Jack was confident that the body's location would not be discovered and even asked for advice on how deep to bury it to avoid being smelled by animals. The police invited the informant to the police station and asked him to wear a wiretap to meet Jack Fuller and talk to him about the crimes, including the murder. The informant agreed and wore a wiretap to the meeting. During the conversation, Jack confessed to the murder, saying that he had buried the victim's body in a remote location that would never be found. However, he did not mention the victim's name. In addition, Jack said that he needed to kill someone else who knew too much. Pointing to his friend Tommy, the police were sure that Tommy knew something important that could help solve the case. Otherwise, Jack would not want to eliminate him. The police took Tommy to the police station for questioning, but he initially refused to cooperate, claiming that he had no information about the case. However, the police knew he was not telling the truth. The police played Tommy a recorded conversation between Jack and another person, in which Jack revealed his desire to harm Tommy because he was likely to reveal information. Realizing that his safety was in danger, Tommy decided to work with the police. He explained that on the night Brittany went missing, he and Jack had been driving around the neighborhood smoking marijuana. They stopped in front of Brittany's house, and Jack decided to go in to talk to Brittany's father about some issues. When he entered, Jack discovered that Brittany was the only person there. 5 minutes after Jack left, he returned to the car with Brittany, who was sitting in the back seat. Tommy said he was confused by her sudden appearance and asked what was going on, but Brittany remained silent, avoiding eye contact. Jack only said that he would drive Tommy home. When they arrived at Tommy's house, Brittany got out of the back seat and moved into the front passenger seat after Tommy got out of the car. Jack then drove away with Brittany. The next day, Jack did not mention the events of the previous day when he met Tommy again. That day, Jack took his car to the car wash, where he washed it thoroughly inside and out. This behavior was unusual for Jack, as he had never done this before. The car wash attendant even joked about washing the car thoroughly, but Jack reacted aggressively, warning the attendant to mind his own business or he would be in danger. Tommy discovered that Brittany was missing and immediately suspected Jack of being involved. He directly asked Jack what happened to her, but Jack's response was aggressive and evasive. Jack claimed to have taken Brittany home, but his attitude was threatening, warning Tommy to ignore it or he would be in trouble. The police found Jack's behavior suspicious and decided to arrest him. Upon arrival, they found Jack holding a can of gasoline, apparently preparing to set the car on fire to destroy potential evidence. During the search, blood was found in the car, and forensics determined that it was Brittany's blood. After the police found out that Jack had visited a car wash after a trip with Brittany, they went there and confiscated the vacuum cleaner he was using. A major discovery was made when criminologists found blood-stained sand inside a vacuum cleaner, and subsequent testing confirmed that the blood was Brittany's. However, despite this incriminating evidence, Jack refused to confess to Brittany's abduction and murder. He also refused to discuss the matter further. The police interviewed all of Jack's acquaintances. Most of them believed that Jack was capable of murder, describing him as a reckless man. Many described him as someone who would do anything. Although Jack did not work anywhere, he always had money. A major revelation came during the investigation. A patrol officer reported seeing Jack's car parked on the side of the road near the woods on the night Brittany disappeared. At the time, police were unaware of Brittany's disappearance and approached Jack, who claimed he was looking for his dog that had run off into the woods. With this information, the search for the body focused on the area where police had seen Jack's car. A comprehensive search effort was launched, involving officers, canine units, helicopters, and volunteers. Unfortunately, despite these efforts, the search was unsuccessful in locating Brittany's body. Police believe Brittany needed a ride to her boyfriend's house that night and asked Jack for help. Jack agreed, but instead of taking her to her destination, he dropped off his friend Tommy and took advantage of the situation to attack and kill Brittany. Police needed to find her body to build a case against Jack. While police were trying to get Jack to confess, a vital witness came forward. A woman who had previously been held hostage by Jack for months contacted police, claiming that she might know where he had hidden Brittany's body. The woman was a former drug addict and Jack had held her hostage for months before she escaped. She had learned of Jack's habits during her captivity and knew his usual haunts. She remembered him showing her a location near power lines, which he claimed would be the perfect place to dump the body without being detected. Initially, police were skeptical of the woman's claims but began questioning her. She provided detailed information about the location, including its location in Lakewood and the condition of the soil. This information caught the attention of police as it matched an earlier tip from an informant who reported that Jack had complained about the difficulty of burying a body in sandy soil. Police conducted a search in the area identified by the woman, about 3 miles from Brittany's residence. The search effort, involving more than 100 people each day, continued for several days despite initially being fruitless. However, a major breakthrough came when experts compared sand found in Jack's vacuum cleaner at the car wash with soil in the search area, confirming a perfect match. The discovery fueled police's determination to continue searching the densely wooded area on the border of Monmouth and Ocean counties. On the morning of Tuesday, July 27, 2004, 15 days after Brittany was reported missing, she was found by 3 New Jersey canine officers who had brought their dogs along on a weekend search to help. Brittany's body was found in a ditch, and a collar with Brittany's name on it was found around her neck. Police knew right away that they had finally found her. The medical examiner confirmed the body's identity as Brittany Gregory through an autopsy. However, due to significant decomposition and multiple injuries, including strangulation and severe head trauma, the medical examiner was unable to determine a sole cause of death. A prosecutor clarified that head trauma was not the primary cause of death. Brittany's body showed no obvious signs of sexual assault, but the medical examiner did not rule out rape. Jack eventually accepted the plea deal after discussing the option with his attorney, a decision that was also supported by Brittany's family, who wanted to avoid a lengthy and grueling trial. Brittany's mother explained that her primary motivation for the deal was not to seek the death penalty for Jack, as she believed that would be too easy an outcome for him. Instead, she wanted Jack to spend the rest of his life in prison, reflecting on his actions and suffering the consequences of his actions. According to Jack, the chain of events that led to the incident began when Brittany asked him to drive her to her boyfriend's house, which Jack agreed to. After dropping off his companion, Tommy, Jack was going to take Brittany to her destination. However, he stopped on the side of the road and started smoking marijuana, which angered Brittany. She screamed and slapped him on the hand. This provoked a violent reaction from Jack, who began punching Brittany. Jack confessed to punching Brittany in the face and head at least twice because she tried to interfere with his marijuana smoking. After the attack, Brittany began gasping for air and making gurgling noises, while Jack continued to get high as blood poured from her nose and mouth. When he finally turned to her, Brittany had stopped breathing. He realized she was dead and decided to dispose of her body. However, Jack's testimony was not credible because the medical examiner found signs of strangulation that Jack did not mention. Additionally, he did not explain why he removed all of Brittany's clothes. The prosecution believed the crime was sexually motivated, and the jury indicted Jack on February 9, 2005, for murder. Jack Fuller pleaded guilty on October 18, 2005, to intentionally causing serious injury resulting in death. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison without parole on January 13th. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. Maria Balin Bernal was born on March 14, 1988, in Quito, Ecuador. Maria studied law at the Central University, where she graduated as a lawyer. She later obtained a specialization and a master's in criminal law from the Andean University Simon Bolivar, and also held a master's in oral litigation from the California Western School of Law. She was pursuing another master's degree in criminal procedural law at an Ecuadorian university. Additionally, she worked for Defensa Penal Group, part of a team of 6 women primarily handling criminal cases. In 2017, Maria married Lieutenant Herman Casares, a police officer. They met after he helped rescue her and her family during a robbery. Following this traumatic event, they continued to communicate and eventually fell in love, moving together to southern Quito. Despite having a child from a previous relationship and being a dedicated mother, Maria successfully balanced her time between her family and career. She became a respected litigator, especially known for her extensive knowledge of criminal procedures. One of her most prominent cases was representing the family of Alejandro Palas, who died in March 2021 after being hit by a patrol car from the Metropolitan Transit Agency of Quito. Maria demonstrated the agent's responsibility in the incident, attributing it to an intensive maneuver that prevented Palas from avoiding the accident. She also handled cases of sexual assault, gender violence, police defense, and alimony, aware that her role as a criminal lawyer had earned her enemies. In mid-2022, she named 2 individuals on TikTok, holding them responsible if anything were to happen to her. On the morning of Sunday, September 11th, Maria entered the General Alberto Enriquez Gallo Police School in north of Quito to bring a hamburger to her husband, Lieutenant Casares, who was on duty inside the school. That night, there was a party at the police facility, attended by officers and cadets, unknown to Maria. Upon entering the police school to find her husband, she was surprised to discover him in his room with Cadet Jocelyn Sanchez, who immediately left the scene. The timeline of the events of September 11th is still unclear, with many details omitted by the police. However, according to some witnesses, Maria and Casares had a violent argument in his dormitory that night. Subsequent to Maria Bellén's disappearance, Cadet Sanchez, who was involved in the incident, later recounted disturbing details. According to Sanchez, Lieutenant Casares assaulted Maria Belén for at least 20 minutes, during which Maria Belén screamed in pain and pleaded for help. It was also revealed that a cadet, alarmed by Maria Bellén's cries and requests for assistance, alerted a superior officer about the fight. However, the superior ordered the cadet not to intervene, insisting that no one should get involved in a husband and wife's problems. Despite at least 20 police members hearing the commotion, no one intervened to help the defenseless woman, and nothing was known of her whereabouts after that night. Cadet Sanchez recalled that Maria Bellén's screams suddenly stopped, followed by a profound silence. Shortly thereafter, she heard Casares leaving the bedroom. Sanchez reported hearing Casares dragging something heavy, bumping against the stairs of the police residence. Although the police school's sentry logged Maria Bellén's entry, her exit was never recorded. On September 12th, Maria Bellén's mother, Elizabeth, received a life-altering call. Around 2 p.m., Casares contacted her to inquire if Maria Belén was with her. According to Casares, his wife hadn't returned home following an argument while heading to their residence. He claimed that Maria Belén exited their car and took a taxi. Elizabeth pressured Casares to report Maria Bellén's disappearance to the authorities, but he excused himself, saying his superiors wouldn't allow him to leave work for this task. Elizabeth, undeterred, requested one of Casares' superiors to permit him to file the report. That evening around 5:30, Maria Bellén's disappearance was officially reported. The next morning, Casares provided a version of events to the police and was even taken to the avenue where he claimed his wife got into a taxi. However, he couldn't pinpoint the exact location where she supposedly crossed the busy avenue, an unlikely place for a taxi to stop in the middle of the night. In an interview with an Ecuadorian digital media outlet, Elizabeth recounted that when Maria Bellén's disappearance was reported, police officers found small blood spots on Casares' mattress in his dormitory. When officers prepared to collect a sample, Casares objected, stating a judicial order was needed for such a procedure and insisting on the presence of his lawyer during any examinations. These events unfolded in front of Elizabeth, who actively followed the official search for her missing daughter from the beginning. Doubts about Casares' involvement grew. He was detained for 8 hours for investigative purposes, as the law allows, but was released after his statement because the prosecutor found insufficient grounds for pretrial detention. The following morning, Casares did not report to work at the police station. Neighbors reported that between 10:40 p.m. on September 13th and 4 a.m. on September 14th, Casares fled. Elizabeth recounted these events during her appearance before the National Assembly of Ecuador on September 27th, highlighting the irregularities in the case. Following the main suspect's escape, the prosecutor's office criticized the police for not surveilling Casares adequately. Following the disappearance of Maria Belén, the police institution reported that the order for surveillance of Lieutenant Casares, the main suspect, was issued after he had already fled. Maria's mother, Elizabeth, believed that the security forces and judicial system failed to ensure safety and due process, allowing the suspect to escape. Of the 20 police officials present at the party on the night of Maria's disappearance, including high-ranking ones who ordered others to remain silent, only Cadet Sanchez was arrested. She was accused of having heard the entire incident and not acting. Sanchez's lawyer told the media that she and Lieutenant Casares had a special friendship and denied any romantic relationship. Security cameras at the police school showed that Casares left the premises twice on the night of September 11th. The first time he was gone for 15 minutes, but the second time he was away for at least 4 hours. During this interval, Casares contacted a cadet identified as Nadesha M., a friend of Sanchez, whose house was searched by authorities on September 22nd. After Maria's disappearance, the Ecuadorian government offered a $20,000 reward for Casares' capture. Public scrutiny fell on Diego Ordonez, the security secretary, and Patricio Carrillo, the interior minister, for their handling of the case. Ordonez emphasized the importance of safeguarding the police's institutional reputation, while Carrillo had left the country amidst the case's uproar. In response to public pressure and protests demanding the truth about Maria's disappearance, Carrillo announced that the police school would be led by women. The police also started administrative processes against 12 members, ranging from colonel to sergeant, but no further arrests were made, leaving only Sanchez in custody. Elizabeth consistently demanded the truth about her daughter's fate, expressing frustration over the lack of case resolution on social media. Carrillo, then the interior minister, promised to resign if Maria was not found within 30 days. Subsequently, a large police contingent was deployed to search for Maria. Elizabeth criticized the police for not effectively searching for her daughter and recounted searching through garbage dumps and ravines herself. On September 21st, human remains were found near the police school. Later that day, President Guillermo Lasso and Minister Carrillo confirmed Maria's femicide via Twitter, vowing to bring the perpetrators to justice and offering condolences to her family. Carrillo apologized to Maria's family at a press conference covered by major media outlets. The case continued to draw significant public attention and scrutiny over the handling of the investigation and the search for the responsible parties. While Minister Carrillo was addressing the media, hundreds of citizens gathered in Quito to demand that the state not let the femicide of Maria Belén go unpunished, and to show her mother that she was not alone. The march, which traveled one of the city's main avenues and reached the police headquarters, was led by feminist organizations and accompanied by relatives of thousands of disappeared people in Ecuador. Amidst posters and photographs of Maria Belén, the demonstrators sang Canción San Mito, which has become an anthem of the feminist movement in the region with adaptations for the Ecuadorian case. A feminist activist who followed Maria Belén's case and publicly spoke about the police's actions and government blunders told the international news agency Infobae that the presence of hundreds of women on the streets was due to feeling mocked, vulnerable, and, above all, fed up. In a statement, 29 feminist organizations declared themselves in permanent mobilization until the full truth about the disappearance and femicide of Maria Belén was known. They rejected Minister Carrillo's version, which labeled the case as a crime of passion, minimizing the institutional complicities within the police that concealed the aggression, failed to intervene, and allowed the main suspects escape. On September 22nd, the Central University of Ecuador's theater, where Maria Belén earned her law degree, was filled with family, friends, activists, journalists, and citizens attending the wake in her honor. Elizabeth arrived at noon, accompanied by the funeral procession carrying her daughter's coffin. Mourning amidst media flashes and microphones, Elizabeth called for independent experts to investigate her daughter's case and demanded to know the truth. Maria Belén's son also attended the wake, and on September 23rd, Maria Belén was buried. Maria Belén Bernal's disappearance and murder have raised questions about police training and suspicions of a possible cover-up by Casares officers and subordinates. The case has sparked a debate on whether Maria Belén's femicide should be considered a state crime. The incident shook Ecuador to the extent that on September 23rd, President Lasso, who described the lawyer's murder as femicide, asked for Minister Carrillo's resignation as Interior Minister, effective immediately. He also ordered the dismissal of 2 police generals, the National Director of Police Judicial Investigation and the Head of Citizen Security and Public Order. Additionally, President Lasso requested the resignation of the entire police high command and gave the police commander, Fausto Salinas, a week to deliver definitive results leading to Castro's capture. Since Maria Belén's body was found, suspicions about the investigators' inefficiency have increased. The police stated that the remains were wrapped in a blanket and buried in a steep hill. However, photographs of the site show a blanket in perfect condition, which, according to the official version, should have been buried for at least 10 days with a decomposing body. Salinas, the police commander, provided details of the autopsy and part of the investigations to an Ecuadorian radio station. However, Police Commander Salinas' statement that Maria died by strangulation has raised suspicions, especially since bloodstains were found in Casra's room and car when luminol was applied. This has led feminist organizations and several lawyers to argue that the police are both judge and party in this case, leading to calls for an impartial entity to ensure the investigation is conducted with the utmost transparency. While the police prioritize finding cáceres and debates continue over state responsibility, the international community awaits the involvement of international experts and oversight by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in the investigation. Maria Belén's family is shattered. Her mother insists that Maria Belén should not become just another statistic among the 206 femicides recorded in Ecuador until September 3, 2022. Before the National Assembly, she demanded speed and transparency in the investigation. Protection was also requested for Maria Belén's best friend, who, since September 15th, had heard strong rumors about the location of the body, found only days later on September 21st. This suggests that authorities did not give due attention to this crucial information. Furthermore, this friend, whose identity is being protected, has received threatening calls from the police. Recent information indicates that Lieutenant Cáceres left Ecuador on the same day the police and prosecutor's office refused to detain him. Surveillance cameras captured him riding his motorcycle across Ecuador to the Colombian border. In Colombia, he traveled to Medellín, where he was last seen in his motorcycle, as reported by Colombian and Ecuadorian media on October 5, 2022. On December 30, 2022, he was arrested in Palomino, La Guajira, Colombia, while working as a bartender. Cáceres, the main suspect in Maria Belén's femicide, was identified through his use of Ecuadorian slang, leading to his capture. He now faces 34 years and 8 months in prison, the maximum penalty in Ecuador for femicide as reported by local media. The case of David Viennes. In California, a man jumped off a cliff into the raging waves. A woman who knew him watched in amazement. The jumper was David Viennes, a successful businessman and celebrity chef who owned a popular restaurant chain. What could have motivated such a successful man to take such a drastic action? The situation was more complicated than it seemed, as David was the prime suspect in a serious criminal case at the time of his jump. According to his friends, David Viennes was charismatic, intelligent, and attracted attention wherever he went. David began dating Dawn in the early 90s while working as a chef at a restaurant where she worked as a waitress. At the time, he had 3 children from previous relationships who lived with their mother, but he remained involved in their lives. David focused on the future, leaving behind his past problems and mistakes. David and Dawn's relationship progressed quickly, leading to their marriage in 1997. At that time, David owned a successful chain of restaurants, which provided him with both fame and a stable income. They tied the knot in Lomita, California, a small town with a population of 20,000 known for its safety and low crime rates, making it an ideal setting for their wedding. A close family friend, Joko Knights, who ran a small auto repair shop, became someone they trusted deeply. Through their friendship, Joko learned some private details about their lives, including that David had a domineering personality and that Dawn sometimes struggled with alcohol. Dawn's addiction escalated to the point where she began drinking early in the morning, hiding the bottles so her husband wouldn't find out she had been drinking. She drank to cope with David's cruelty. To hide her finances from her husband, she asked a family friend named Joe to keep her money. According to him, she last gave him money on October 18, 2009, and Dawn had saved over $1,000. The following Monday, Dawn did not show up for work. Her car was parked near her house, but she was missing. Worried, Joe asked David where his wife was, and David replied that she had left the house. He explained that she felt pressured by her husband, so she wanted to go to alcohol withdrawal. Joe is skeptical of David's answer. He begins to monitor David's behavior and realizes that Katie Galvin, one of the waitresses, is having an affair with him. Katie used to work at David's restaurant, and she is now trying to replace Dawn. Dawn is still unreachable, her phone is turned off, and her car is still parked at home. This raises the question, where could Dawn have gone without a car? Joe observes that Dawn's belongings are thrown out. After failing to contact Dawn, her friends filed a police report. David kept telling everyone the same story. They had an argument, and she left, taking only her expensive Louis Vuitton bag. It was strange that she left her car behind, since it was necessary to get around in that small town, which had no airport or train station. She would have needed her own transportation to leave. It seemed unlikely that a rich woman like Dawn would take the intercity bus. While investigating David's past, police found out that he was not only a skilled cook, but also sold large quantities of weed. He had been involved in this activity before February 2009. His restaurant business was thriving, so he didn't need to closely oversee it. This gave him the opportunity to focus on distributing drugs to small dealers. In February 2005, David was arrested for drug trafficking, revealing that this was not his first offense. He had been convicted of similar activities in 1993. David worked as a police informant, always available and assisting when needed. This cooperation led to the dismantling of a citywide drug trafficking network, for which he served only 1 year in prison. In February 2008, after being released from prison, David got married and moved to Lomita with Dawn, where they lived until the unfortunate events of February 2009. When his wife mysteriously disappeared, he asked his daughter, Jackie, to accompany him to the restaurant to help with the business. Jackie helped with the business, while Katie was his mistress and aspired to be Mrs. David in the future. Jackie was 19 years old at the time. David kept telling everyone the same story about his wife, Dawn's disappearance, that they had a fight and she left him. However, Jackie suspected that her father was not telling the truth. Jackie directly asked her father where Dawn was. David shocked her by admitting that he had accidentally killed Dawn and asked his daughter to keep quiet and not call the police. Jackie agreed. Meanwhile, the police began to suspect David. In response, he took drastic action by asking his new girlfriend Katie to send text messages from Dawn's phone, pretending that everything was fine and there was no need to worry. David thought that once the police saw these messages, they would close the case. However, these messages only raised suspicions. This was because Dawn always signed her messages with the nickname Pixie, but Katie made a mistake and wrote the nickname wrong. The police obtained a search warrant for the David family home and conducted an inspection. They discovered blood in the bedroom and another room, but the stains were old and showed signs of attempted removal, making them unusable as evidence. 16 months after the Dawn's disappearance, it was impossible to find proof of the David's guilt. Although the police were almost certain that the David had killed Dawn, they lacked solid evidence against him. The only lead was the blood found in the house, which ultimately led nowhere. Reporters closely followed the case from the beginning, as it was a novel event in the area. This media attention benefited the investigation by keeping the suspect on edge, as people under pressure tend to make mistakes. One day, a reporter visited a restaurant and loudly claimed that David's entire house was covered in blood. This was a bluff, but it had the effect. David became anxious, and the reporter was expelled from the restaurant. The police decided to question David's daughter, Jackie. 2 police officers met her and took a confession from her. Jackie told them what had happened and then called her father, warning him that the police would be coming to arrest him until a warrant was issued. The press learned of the details and published the story on February 23, 2011. Overwhelmed, David confessed everything to his girlfriend, Katie Galvin. He claimed it was an accident and expressed that he did not want to spend the rest of his life in prison, saying that ending his life was the better option. After saying this, he rushed to his car, and Katie followed him. Despite the situation, Katie felt calm, believing that he would not harm her. They reached the cliff where David had left Katie in the car. He ran and jumped off the cliff. Amazingly, the 25-meter fall was not fatal for David. He survived. However, David's body had many broken bones. He was rescued from the cliff by a helicopter and taken to the hospital. If he had jumped head first, he would have died, but fate had other plans. A few days later, he confessed to the police from his hospital bed. He mentioned that the most recent conflict with his wife was due to Dawn's bad habits. She was not only abusing alcohol but also addicted to illegal drugs. His daughter confirmed his testimony. David explained that their conflict on the night of the incident was due to illegal substances. He came home after midnight, exhausted from working 90 hours a week. All he wanted was to relax, but he anticipated that his wife would return under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Since she wasn't home yet, he locked the bedroom door to avoid being disturbed and went to sleep. Later, when his wife returned and tried to enter the bedroom, he told her to sleep in another room and not to bother him. The Dawn became angry and burst into the bedroom, breaking the lock, and started hitting David in the face. Afterwards, she ran into the living room. David followed Dawn, saw the substances she had, took them away, and threw them in the sink. In response, she acted aggressively and lunged at him. To protect himself, David used table tape to bind her hands to prevent her from moving, attacking, or throwing anything at him. He mentioned that he had to deal with his wife's psychosis this way more than once. He restrained her and left her there until the effects of the substances faded. While she screamed in anger, David just wanted peace and ended up taping her mouth shut. He went to bed around 3 in the morning. In the morning, as was his habit, he rolled over to his wife's side but found her gone. He fell asleep again, forgetting that she was still tied up in the living room. When he woke up and went downstairs, he found Dawn dead. David realized that under the influence of drugs, she had started to feel nauseous and choked because her mouth was taped shut. In despair, he felt that his life was over, but he didn't want to spend the rest of his life in prison. So he decided to dispose of her body. He carefully packed it and took it to his restaurant. David describes how he used a large vat in the restaurant to dip his wife in water and boil her for 4 days to tenderize the meat. He then cut her body into pieces, put them in garbage bags, and dumped them in a dumpster. When the garbage truck collects the restaurant's food waste, the remains of a boiled human being would likely go unnoticed because they would be unrecognizable. It is hard to understand how this could have happened when the restaurant was open at the time. During the investigation, restaurant staff claimed that they did not remember anything suspicious. The story seemed unbelievable and many people doubted David's testimony. Nearly 2 years later, David, now in a wheelchair, appeared in court. After the first hearing, he dismissed his lawyer, believing that the lawyer was not effectively handling his case. The prosecution suggested a possible motive for the murder. David had previously complained that Dawn had stolen about $200 from the restaurant cash register. During the trial, David claimed that after 17 years of marriage, he would never intentionally harm his wife, especially over such a small amount of money. He found it ridiculous to be charged with first-degree murder for such a trivial reason. David maintained that he had always provided for his wife, buying her expensive clothes. However, the prosecutor portrayed David as a cold-blooded and cruel killer who had planned the murder in advance. The Dawn feared her husband and saved money to leave him, but she ran out of time. The jury deliberated for over 5 hours on the case. David Viennes was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2023 after serving 15 years. Currently, he remains incarcerated but could be released at any time. The remains of Dawn Viennes have never been located. Despite extensive searches at the dump, David claimed he hid his wife's skull and jawbone in his mother's attic, but the police were unable to find any evidence there. The Petit family was indeed seen as a model family, fulfilling the best expectations with their stable economic background and exemplary children. They were genuinely admired by those around them. The father, William Petit, was born and raised in Connecticut and stood out in almost every sport during high school, particularly in basketball, where he was a natural leader. In addition to his athletic prowess, he was also the most intelligent of his class, as evidenced by his completion of a law degree at Dartmouth University. However, his true calling was not law. He wanted to help people, care for the sick, and make the world a better place. So, after graduating, he decided to pursue a career in medicine at the University of Pittsburgh. During his third year of residency at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, William met Jennifer Hawk, a nurse in the oncology area and co-director of the health center of a pre-graduate internship. They soon fell in love, and those who knew them affirmed they were perfect for each other. They got married in 1985. 4 years later, they welcomed their first daughter, Haley, and the pregnancy spurred them to form a large family, leading them to buy a house in Cheshire, Connecticut. On November 17, 1995, their second daughter, Michaela, was born. After recovering from childbirth, Jennifer continued her work as a nurse and co-director of the internship. Unfortunately, she later developed multiple sclerosis, an incurable disease she battled for the rest of her life. However, her family never ceased to support her. At the age of 10, their eldest daughter began fundraising for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, which would raise significant funds over the years. Michaela also excelled academically and planned to take over the fundraising efforts when her sister went to college to continue helping her community. She had spent the summer learning to cook and often enjoyed preparing meals for her family. Tragically, this routine activity would lead the family to a fateful encounter with their perpetrator. One July night in February 2007, Michaela was preparing dinner for her family, but needed more ingredients for her recipe. So she and her mother went to the nearest market. At the same place was Joshua Komisarchevsky, who had recently been released from prison. Komisarchevsky's childhood was traumatic and complicated. Born to teenage parents, he was put up for adoption a week after birth by his mother and was adopted by the Komisarchevsky family, known for their reputation as distinguished artists in Europe. They were a religious family and very strict with him. Despite his high IQ, he struggled in school, leading his parents to homeschool him. During his trial, he claimed that he was sexually abused by a cousin in his childhood, but his family chose to keep it quiet. This led him to develop a rebellious and chaotic personality. By the age of 14, Joshua Komisarchevsky had been accused of abusing his sister, and it was around this time that he committed his first burglary, marking the start of his career as a thief. In February 2002, he was arrested for the first time on 18 charges of burglary and theft and was subsequently sentenced to 9 years in prison. During the trial, he made a chilling statement saying, "I like to listen to people while they sleep. I like the feeling of invading their privacy and security." He was released on parole in February 2007 at the age of 27. Officials in charge considered him a danger to society, being a calculating criminal with perverted tendencies. However, the jury did not heed the warnings and declared Joshua ostensibly fit for release. After his release, he stayed in a residence for ex-convicts, where he met his accomplice, Stephen Hayes. Hayes had spent a significant portion of his life in prison, first being incarcerated at the age of 16 in the year 1980. Over the years, he was frequently arrested for violent robbery and burglary. He was sentenced in February 2004 and again granted parole in February 2006, which led him to the Singh halfway house where he met Komisarchevsky. Returning to the night of July 22, 2007, Michaela Padgett was preparing dinner for her family, but realized she needed more ingredients for her recipe. She asked her mother to take her to the nearest market to shop. Little did they know they were being observed by Komisarchevsky, who meticulously noted every detail, the make and model of their vehicle, their faces, and Michaela's blonde hair. After shopping, the Padgett family returned home, unaware that they were being followed. Shortly afterwards, Hayes sent a text message to Komisarchevsky that read, "I'm chopping at the bit to get started. Need a margarita soon." Hayes then texted, "We still on?" Komisarchevsky replied, "Yes." Hayes's next text asked, "Soon?" To which Komisarchevsky replied, "I'm putting the kid to bed, hold your horses." Hayes replied, "Dude, the horses want to get loose." Komisarchevsky discreetly trailed the family in his car, learning the exact location of their home before withdrawing from the scene. The family enjoyed what seemed like a peaceful and normal dinner, unaware that it would be their last moment together. In the early hours, while everyone slept except for the father, William Petit, who had dozed off in the living room, their peace was shattered by strange noises inside the house. The next thing William remembered was a sense of grogginess, pain, and an inability to formulate a coherent thought. Zarzewski and Hayes had entered the house through an unlocked door and initially planned to rob the family. However, the night took a tragic turn. They found a baseball bat in the house and used it to repeatedly beat William, who remained conscious despite the assault. He heard one of the intruders say, "If he moves, shoot him." William was then tied up with zip ties and ropes, immobilized and bound to a pole in the basement. The intruders then went upstairs to find Haley's room, where she was sleeping. Haley and Michaela Petit were tied by their hands and feet to their bedposts, and their heads were covered with pillowcases. Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Jennifer Pritted had fallen asleep. The intruders quietly entered the room and woke her up. Without much effort, they tied Jennifer's hands and feet. Feeling in control of the house, the intruders took their time to inspect it, even smoking cigarettes in the living room. After collecting jewelry, cash, and other valuables, they decided to leave. It seemed the ordeal was over for the Petit family as they heard the burglars leaving. However, their torment was far from over. After selling the stolen items at a pawn shop and realizing they hadn't gotten as much money as expected, the ex-convicts, motivated by greed, decided to return to the house. They then found a check register with $40,000. They decided to steal $15,000. They also had stopped to fill a couple of gasoline cans before returning, as seen in surveillance camera footage. Back at the house, they told Jennifer their plan, threatening to kill her entire family if she didn't cooperate. Desperate but thinking of her daughter's safety, Jennifer agreed to accompany Stephen to the bank the next morning. Meanwhile, Joshua took advantage of Jennifer's absence, entering Michaela's room, untying her and beginning to undress her. He took photos with his cell phone and assaulted her, recording the act. Afterward, he took her to the bathroom to clean her, ensuring no DNA evidence was left, then ordered her to put her pajamas back on and tied her up again. Evidence that Thomas Zarzewski raped Michaela came from her autopsy, during which state medical examiner Dr. Wayne Carver found his DNA in her body. At the bank, everything seemingly went well, but Stephen failed to notice what Jennifer did while in the coup. Before approaching the teller, she wrote a note on a flyer asking for help. The note read, "My name is Jennifer Hawk Petit. I need to withdraw $15,000 from my savings account. My family is in danger. Please call the police or they will be killed." The teller decided to give her the money, even though Jennifer had no identification. With the cash in hand, Jennifer left the bank to return to the car with her captor, while the bank employee immediately called the police to report the incident. The manager told the dispatcher of the 911 line that Hawk Petit had indicated that the home invaders were bien nice and that she believed they only wanted money. The Cheshire police responded to the bank's report by assessing the situation and setting up a vehicle perimeter without revealing their presence. The police, now aware of the situation, observed from a distance without intervening. Back at the house, Joshua told his accomplice what he had done to Michaela, suggesting he could do the same to Jennifer. Without hesitation, Stephen subdued Jennifer, pressed her body to the ground, and began to undress her. William was able to hear his wife's assault upstairs. He yelled up and heard one of the invaders say, "Don't worry, it's all going to be over in a couple of minutes." Meanwhile, William Petit, regaining consciousness and hearing his wife's screams, managed to free himself and crawl to the basement stairs, eventually making it to the backyard. He later said, "I thought it's now or never because in my mind at that moment, I thought they were going to shoot all of us." In a minute, Joshua went to check on William, only to find that he had escaped. Hayes said in her confession that while he was raping Hawk Petit on the living room floor, Thomas Zarzewski entered and announced that William had escaped. Hearing this, Stephen strangled Jennifer to death while continuing to assault her. Soon after, they heard William shouting for help. His neighbor, who initially didn't recognize him due to the injuries, called 911 immediately. Realizing the police would soon be called, the intruders decided to eliminate all evidence. Haves and Zarzewski doused Jennifer's lifeless body and parts of the house, including the daughters' bedrooms and daughters themselves, with gasoline. Investigators would later find the accelerant on the Petit sisters' beds and on the clothing they were wearing. Hayes and Thomas Zarzewski started a fire and flooded the scene. Unaware that the authorities had blocked the area a few miles ahead, they collided with a police vehicle within 5 minutes. After they were surrounded by the police, the two perpetrators were pulled from their vehicle and arrested. They were immediately identified as ex-convicts. Meanwhile, the fire in the house was rapidly growing. An ambulance arrived and transported the gravely injured father, Dr. William Petit, to the nearest hospital. Shortly afterward, firefighters attempted to combat the blaze and, upon extinguishing it, discovered a horrific scene in the remnants of the house. The first body found was that of Jennifer, completely charred with remnants of rope around her ankles. Upon reaching the second floor, they found Michaela tied to her bed, completely consumed by the fire. Haley, surprisingly, had managed to force her restraints and attempted to escape, but collapsed just a few meters away, having inhaled too much smoke. William had been able to free himself of his restraints, exit the house, and crawl to a neighbor's yard for help. The neighbor initially did not recognize him due to the severity of his injuries. Both Hayes and Komisarchevsky confessed to the murders. Detectives testified that Hayes smelled of gasoline throughout her interrogation. Each assailant claimed that the other was the driving force and mastermind behind the home invasion. Komisarchevsky also blamed William for the murders. In Komisarchevsky's diary, which was later entered into evidence, he called William a coward and claimed that he could have saved his family if he wanted to. Stephen Hayes' trial began on September 1330, with a jury of 7 women and 5 men. The defense argued that Joshua Komisarchevsky was the mastermind behind the crime and responsible for escalating its violent nature, while prosecutors held that both Hayes and Komisarchevsky shared responsibility. On October 5th, after about 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Hayes guilty. The sentencing phase began on October 18th, with the jury initially split over recommending life imprisonment or death. Hayes' defense argued that life imprisonment without parole would be a harsher punishment. On November 8th, the jury recommended the death sentence for Hayes on each of the 6 capital felony counts. Hayes had previously attempted to negotiate a plea bargain for a life sentence, but prosecutors sought the death penalty. Dr. William Petit, the sole survivor, commented on the verdict, and the Connecticut State Judicial Branch offered post-traumatic stress assistance to jurors due to the disturbing nature of the trial. For the first time in state history, the Connecticut State Judicial Branch offered post-traumatic stress assistance to jurors who served for 2 months on the triple murder trial because they had been required to look at disturbing images and hear grisly testimony. On December 2, 2010, Hayes apologized for the pain and suffering he had caused the Pritt family and added that death for me will be a welcome relief, and I hope it will bring some peace and comfort to those who I have hurt so much. Judge John Blue imposed 6 death sentences and an additional 106 years for other crimes. However, Hayes' death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment in August 2015 when Connecticut abolished capital punishment. Joshua Komisarchevsky's trial began on September 1931. His attorneys offered a guilty plea in exchange for a life sentence, but prosecutors aimed for the death penalty, arguing that Komisarchevsky was a confused man led by Hayes. Komisarchevsky was found guilty on October 1331, and the jury recommended the death penalty on December 9, 2011. During his sentencing, Komisarchevsky spoke about his shame and hurt caused by the crime, insisting that he did not intend to kill anyone. Judge Blue set July 2032 as Komisarchevsky's execution date, echoing his responsibility for the crime. However, like Hayes, Komisarchevsky's death sentence was converted to life imprisonment in August 2015 after Connecticut abolished the death penalty. The trials and subsequent sentencing of Hayes and Komisarchevsky marked a significant and harrowing chapter in Connecticut's legal history. The brutal nature of the crimes and the trial's emotional toll on all involved, including the jurors, highlighted the complexities and challenges of the legal system in dealing with such heinous acts. Dr. Petit's statements during the trials underscored the lasting impact of the crime on surviving family members and the community, which continues to honor the memory of the victims. The only survivor, Dr. William Petit, was discharged from the hospital 4 days after his admission to attend the funeral of his family. Haunted by guilt and the torment of having survived, he later established a foundation to help children and young victims of violence, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars. Subsequently, as a member of the Republican Party, he ventured into politics and became a state representative. The murders of the Petit family left a deep impact on the community, which gathers annually to pay tribute to them. Questions remain among family members and the public about whether the authorities acted correctly in their response to the situation. The time spent by the authorities observing the situation from a distance could have been crucial in preventing the tragedy. The case of Jessica Lunsford. In the quiet town of Homosassa, Florida, a young girl named Jessica Marie Lunsford was abducted from her home in the middle of the night. She was just 9 years old, full of innocence and dreams for the future. Her abduction sent shock waves through the community and exposed a grave failure in the system meant to protect children. As news of Jessica's disappearance spread, a massive search effort was launched. Law enforcement, volunteers, and concerned citizens thoroughly searched the area, desperately hoping to bring her back safely. Jessica's family and friends, filled with anguish and fear, clung to hope while recounting stories of her contagious laughter, vibrant personality, and the joy she had brought into their lives. Days had passed, turning into weeks, and the search grew more intense. The tragedy of Jessica's disappearance highlighted the importance of community vigilance and the need for swift action in cases involving missing children. Law enforcement agencies worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, following leads and leaving no stone unturned. Their dedication to finding Jessica and bringing those responsible to justice became paramount. This is the story of Jessica Marie Lunsford, a young girl whose life was tragically cut short, but whose memory continues to inspire change. Jessica Marie Lunsford was born on October 6, 1995, and lived most of her life in North Carolina with her parents, Mark and Angela. When she was born, she had a few older teenage siblings. She was considered a miracle baby, as her mother Angela had suffered a few miscarriages before her birth. However, her parents divorced a year after she was born, and her father was granted full custody. For most of her life, she was the only child living with her father, and the two were very close, like best friends. Mark worked in construction and sometimes couldn't afford a babysitter, so he would bring his daughter to work with him. She would hang out, talk to his coworkers, and play with wood chips, and everyone loved her. Eventually, her grandparents moved to Homosassa, Florida, to be with them. They would go shopping and play games together. They would also take her out and go to karaoke, as Jessica wanted to be a musician. She was inspired by her two favorite artists, Pink and Shania Twain. Her career interests changed frequently because she loved to do many things, including acting and working in fashion. Her dream of working in fashion was inspired by her grandmother, who often took her shopping to fabric stores and also sewed clothes for her dolls. Jessica was an outgoing, affectionate, and friendly girl who loved hugs and cuddling and treated everyone with love and kindness. One day, when Jessica was 9 years old, her father had a date with a woman he had not dated since his divorce from Angela, so he was very happy about it. He left Jessica with her grandparents, who would put her to bed when he wasn't home. He went out to meet his date and ended up staying the night at her house. When he showed up the following morning to take Jessica to school, he heard Jessica's alarm ringing and was surprised that she hadn't shut it off yet. He then went to her room and found her bed empty. Her school clothes were untouched. She was nowhere in the house, and she wasn't outside. That's when he realized he had forgotten to lock the door after he had left. Mark became anxious and contacted the police to report that Jessica was missing. After finishing the call, he reached out to every person he knew and inquired if they had seen or heard from her. Her grandparents had not seen her since they had put her to bed, and her grandfather did not check on her when he woke up at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. The police issued a nationwide alert about the missing 9-year-old girl and received assistance from 100 people who went out to search for her. The police asked if it was possible that she had run away to look for her mother, whom she had not seen for 4 years. But Mark said she would never do that. She would never just go off searching for her mother. And besides, her mother lived in a different state. Police tried to rule out every possible scenario before assuming it was an abduction case. They also asked if she might have engaged in any online conversations with strangers, as this was the early 2000s when online chat rooms and the associated dehingers were becoming a new problem. Mark said no. She's 9 years old and does not participate in any of that online internet activity. Mark also noticed that a purple dolphin stuffed animal, which he had one for Jessica at a fair just a few weeks earlier and which Jessica loved, was missing. This led the police to confirm that it was most likely a case of abduction. The police accessed the sex offender registry and conducted a search for all sex offenders and pedophiles in the area, performing door-to-door interviews to gather information, check for any suspicious activity, and obtain alibis. The investigators had a significant task ahead of them as their registry search identified 208 sex offenders they needed to look into. Mark and Jessica's grandfather were questioned and considered possible suspects. It was distressing for them to sit through 3 days of repeated interrogation and questioning about whether they were involved in Jessica's disappearance, if they had harmed her, given her away, or were in any way responsible. They were deeply concerned as they cared greatly for Jessica. Her father was her closest friend, and her grandfather adored her. Being treated as suspects was heartbreaking. They both underwent polygraph tests, which they passed, even though such tests are not entirely reliable and are not admissible as evidence in court. Angela had not seen her daughter in years and had even remarried and had a child. She had not heard anything about Jessica missing. The police were running out of leads, and everything had started to feel hopeless until they visited the home of 46-year-old John Cooey, one of the sex offenders. John Cooey was a dangerous man who had several convictions, including a dozen robbery charges, and was also a registered sex offender. During the investigation, he had an outstanding warrant for his arrest for being in possession of cannabis. When the police went to his home, they found out that he had relocated without informing the police, which is a federal violation. Sex offenders are required to inform the police whenever they relocate so that the information can be updated in the sex offender registry. With a few family members, the police went to the trailer where John's sister lived. His sister informed the police that he was living with them, but she was not sure where he was at the moment. Nevertheless, what the police did not know was that they were just a few feet away from Jessica at that time, while she was still alive. During the period, they were questioning John's family concerning his whereabouts. The police entered the house and looked through some doors, but they were not allowed to search further at that moment. The frightened young girl was sitting in the dark closet of John's bedroom, not making any noise, as she was instructed by him to remain quiet and stay in the closet regardless of what occurred. It is unfortunate that Jessica was very close to being rescued. If only the closet door had been opened after the weekend when Jessica had first gone missing. Police came to check on John once again. His niece had given him money for a bus ticket, but didn't know where he was going. John was a prime suspect, as he had been running away just a few days after Jessica had originally gone missing, which raised red flags for the police, along with the fact that his sister's trailer was located around 100 yards away from Jessica's home. They finally found John at a homeless shelter, where he had used his real name to sign in. He told the police he was there to find work. He was questioned about Jessica, but claimed he had no idea what happened to the girl and had never known of her existence until he saw the news. The police had to release him at that particular time, as they had no grounds to hold him. They released him on March 12th, a few weeks after Jessica had gone missing. The officers later obtained a search warrant to look through his sister's trailer. In his bedroom, inside his closet, the police found a mattress DNA testing on the mattress matched that of Jessica's. John was immediately arrested and charged with the kidnapping and murder of Jessica Lansford. On March 18, 2005, John Cooley made a confession to the police. He had initially intended to break in and rob the home, but he made too much noise, and Jessica woke up and saw him. Panicked, he was afraid that she would inform on him as she had seen his face. Without thinking, he grabbed her and put his hand over her mouth, telling her not to scream. He informed her that she had to go with him, but before leaving, she requested if she could get her preferred stuffed animal, which he agreed to. She returned with the purple dolphins that her father had won for her at the fair. Once they reached his home, he sexually assaulted her and told her to stay in his bed and not leave the room, and they fell asleep. The following morning, he sexually assaulted her again. instructing her not to make any noise and never come out under any circumstances, as there would be negative consequences if she did. Then he left for work. When he returned home, he discovered that the police were asking questions and knew he had to take action. He was unsure whether to let her go back home because he feared returning to prison. Instead, when the house was empty, he sexually assaulted Jessica one last time and told her he would take her back home to her father, but she had to comply with his demands. He opened 2 large plastic garbage bags and told her to get inside along with her stuffed animal. He informed her that he would drop her off at her house and she could break free from the bags. However, he dug a hole approximately 3 feet deep, buried her alive, and then escaped. It was very sad because John would have been caught digging a hole and placing her body inside it if the view wasn't completely blocked off by a giant tent that the police put up near Jessica's home in case something happened and they were needed right away. This had the opposite effect. Jessica could have been saved, but the chance was gone. After retrieving the body from the ground, the medical examiner discovered that Jessica had used her last breath of strength to try and free herself by poking 2 of her fingers through the plastic bags, and her 2 fingers were skeletonized. The medical examiner said that she had run out of air and suffocated after roughly 1 to 3 minutes of being on the ground, and the rest of the body had averaged to severe decomposition. Initially, the judge had ruled that John's confession would be inadmissible in court as he confessed without his lawyer present. However, the trial court decided that all evidence gathered after the confession, including the discovery of the body, autopsy report, and incriminating statements made by him to investigators and a jail guard, would be admissible in court. John's trial had to be held in Miami as they could not find an impartial jury in Hammasasa. On March 7, 2007, John was found guilty of the following crimes: first-degree murder, kidnapping, assault or battery on a person, burglary, and sexual battery. He was sentenced to death. But on September 30, 2009, before his sentence could be carried out, he died of natural causes approximately 2 years after murdering Jessica. Jessica's family, who endured unimaginable pain and grief, became advocates for stronger laws and measures to protect children. Their unwavering commitment to ensuring that no other family experiences such a tragedy is a testament to their love for Jessica. Jessica will be remembered as a sociable, caring, and warm-hearted girl who loved hugs and embraced and treated everyone with love and generosity. Jessica's story sparked a nationwide conversation about the safety of our children, prompting communities to come together, demanding reforms, and raising awareness about the importance of protecting and cherishing every child. The investigation into Jessica's abduction led to changes in legislation, ensuring that sex offenders are closely monitored and that law enforcement agencies have the necessary tools to prevent similar incidents from occurring in the future. As we remember Jessica, we honor her memory by continuing to work towards a world where every child can grow up in safety and security. Her spirit lives on through the actions and advocacy of those inspired by her story. Marlene Warren was born on April 15, 1950, in Michigan, USA. Growing up without a father, she dreamt of having a large and close-knit family from a young age. This dream soon became a reality when she married a man named John, with whom she had 2 children. However, years later, the family faced an unexpected tragedy when John suddenly passed away from an illness, leaving Marlene alone with her 2 young children. Marlene dedicated herself to work, striving to support her children on her own. 6 years after her husband's death, Marlene met a man named Michael Warren. They soon married, and Michael was involved in the used car business. After marrying, he started his own business in this sector. By this time, Marlene was earning good money and chose to invest in Michael's business, also assisting in its management. The business thrived and the couple expanded it, buying several properties to rent out, improving their financial situation significantly. The family moved to Wellington, a luxurious suburb of Miami, where they bought a large house. Although their life seemed almost perfect, another tragedy struck in 1988 when Marlene's eldest son died in a car accident, deeply affecting her and her younger son, Joseph. After her son's death, Marlene considered selling the rental properties. While the business was profitable, it was also a constant source of worry. Issues with tenants not paying rent or losing their income were common, and Marlene, being kind-hearted and empathetic due to her own past struggles, found it difficult to evict people. However, she and Michael couldn't afford to let people live in their properties for free. Eventually, Marlene wanted to get out of the business to avoid these moral dilemmas. 2 years had passed since her son's death, and the family was beginning to recover and return to normalcy. However, on the morning of May 26, 1990, something terrible and unexpected occurred. Marlene was at home with her son and 3 of his friends who had come over for breakfast. Their kitchen had a view of the driveway. Suddenly, the doorbell rang and Marlene went to answer it. Her son saw a white Chrysler parked in front of their house. When Marlene opened the front door, she was greeted by a person dressed as a clown, holding 2 balloons and a bouquet of flowers. Marlene commented, "How cute," but then something unexpected happened. The clown who appeared at Marlene Warren's doorstep suddenly pulled out a gun and shot her in the head. Marlene's son and his friends, who were in the house, rushed to the hallway, only to be met with the shocking sight of Marlene bleeding on the ground. The clown, dressed in full costume, stared at them for a few seconds before returning to the white Chrysler and driving away. Marlene's son, despite having an injured leg, urged his friend to drive after the clown, but they were unable to locate the vehicle. Marlene was quickly taken to the hospital in an unconscious state, and the police began their investigation. They first spoke with everyone in the house at the time of the attack. Marlene's son could not identify the assailant due to the costume, gloves, and wig, noting only that the attacker had very dark eyes. His friends added that the clown was quite tall and that the work shoes worn were strikingly different from the costume. A neighbor walking their dog near Marlene's house also saw the clown but couldn't provide significant information to the police. The investigators started looking for a white Chrysler and sought other evidence. Their first suspicion fell on Michael, Marlene's husband, who had left for a Miami racetrack that morning and was not at home during the attack. Despite having reasons to believe he was involved, such as the family's fondness for clowns and an anonymous tip to investigate Michael and a 26-year-old woman named Sheila Keene, the police found that Michael was around 110 kilometers away from home, making it physically impossible for him to commit the crime. Sheila Keene, who worked at Michael's used car business, was rumored to be having a secret affair with him. This relationship had been speculated by some colleagues. If Michael was in a relationship with another woman and wanted to leave Marlene, he faced a significant financial loss in a divorce, as most of the family assets were in Marlene's name. Despite the lack of concrete evidence linking Michael and Sheila to the crime, the police still consider their involvement probable. Given the disguise used by the assailant, the police considered whether Sheila could have been the clown. Witnesses couldn't confirm the attacker's gender, and Sheila was known for her assertive character. She handled clients who were late on rental payments, often needing to repossess cars, a job in which she was unyielding and for which she carried a .38 caliber pistol, the same caliber used to shoot Marlene. After the bullet was removed from Marlene's head, it was determined to be from a .38 caliber gun, raising further suspicions about Sheila's potential involvement in the crime. The police revisited Sheila Keene to inspect her firearm, but Sheila claimed that her gun had either been stolen or lost months before Marlene Warren's shooting, leaving the detectives with no solid leads. During their investigation, they learned that Sheila was divorced and that after leaving her husband's house, Sheila moved into a rented apartment, and there were suspicions that Michael Warren, Marlene's husband, was paying for this accommodation. An interesting discovery awaited the police in their investigation regarding the whereabouts of the clown costume, balloons, and flowers used in the crime. 2 days before the attack on Marlene, a woman had entered a costume shop near Sheila's apartment. The shop was closed at the time, but the woman insisted on being served. She urgently requested a clown costume, a wig, face makeup, and a red nose. Despite being told to return the next day as the shop was closing, the woman persisted and the employees eventually sold her the items. There were no surveillance cameras in the store, so the police had to rely on the employee's verbal description of the woman, who they described as tall and thin with dark hair. When shown photographs by the detectives, the employees indicated that the woman resembled Sheila. The investigation also traced the balloons and flowers to a supermarket located about 1 kilometer from Sheila's apartment. The seller reported that a woman matching the description given by the costume shop employees had purchased these items just a few hours before Marlene was shot. He added that the customer behaved rudely and somewhat masculinely. 2 days into the investigation, on May 28th, the police were informed that Marlene had succumbed to her injuries and the case was reclassified as a murder. The detectives continued their investigation, seeking more evidence against Sheila. They obtained a warrant to search her apartment. Concurrently, they received a tip about a white Chrysler parked 13 kilometers from Marlene's residence. Upon inspection, the investigators confirmed it was the same vehicle driven by the assailant. Inside, they found long dark hairs and orange fibers that appeared to be from a clown wig. During a search of Sheila's apartment, the police found identical orange particles and work boots that matched the description given by witnesses, similar to those worn by the clown. However, due to the absence of routine DNA analysis at that time, all the evidence against Sheila was circumstantial, which could lead to her acquittal in court. Detectives then turned their attention to how the clown had acquired the car used to reach Marlene's house. They uncovered that about 1.5 months before Marlene's murder, a man had mistakenly rented a car from one of Michael Warren's main competitors. When this mix-up was reported to Michael, his reaction was notably strange. Rather than informing a customer about a mistaken car rental from one of his competitors, Michael Warren told the man to just leave the car in the parking lot and put the keys inside. Michael then asked an employee to take him and Sheila to the parking lot and instructed the employee to keep quiet about the incident. The employee witnessed Michael and Sheila leaving in the same way Chrysler. This happened shortly after a serious disagreement between Michael and his competitors, where Michael had been giving his competitors a negative image in his advertisements, which they disliked. Detectives decided to investigate Michael's business further and found numerous legal infractions, including tax and insurance manipulation. They also found evidence suggesting that Michael had used illegal methods to repossess cars, even when clients had paid on time and met all conditions. During this investigation, police spoke with an employee who recalled an interesting incident where Michael and Marlene had an argument at work. After Marlene left, Michael asked the employee how much it would cost to make his wife disappear. Although this sounded suspicious, detectives still had no evidence linking Michael to the murder. Nevertheless, he was arrested for various business manipulations and initially sentenced to 8 years in prison, but was released after 4 years. In February 2002, Michael married Sheila and moved to another state. Although detectives could never prove Michael's involvement in the murder, they continued to monitor him. After moving, Sheila began introducing herself to new acquaintances as a police officer and had dyed her hair from dark to blonde. She and Michael opened a restaurant and seemed to have built a good life. However, rumors began circulating among their employees that Sheila had murdered Michael's ex-wife. Apparently, an employee stumbled upon information about the crime and discovered that the police had suspected them. Still, without definitive proof, the case remained unresolved until it was reopened in 2013. A new investigative team requested a re-examination of all available evidence as DNA testing and other forensic technologies had significantly advanced since 1990. It took several years to re-examine the evidence. First, the orange fibers found in Sheila's apartment. The car and the crime scene were compared, showing they were almost identical. The most significant lead came later when experts took DNA samples from several hairs found in the white Chrysler and compared them to Sheila's DNA, which matched perfectly. This provided irrefutable evidence that Sheila had been in the same car the clown used to drive to Marlene's house. Sheila was arrested in 2017, then 54 years old, and continued to deny her guilt. She was denied bail and awaited trial in jail. Michael insisted he had nothing to do with Marlene's murder and believed Sheila was innocent as well. He hired expensive lawyers for her and the trial had been prolonged for years. In preparation for the trial, the police uncovered some previously unknown facts. About a year after Marlene Warren's murder, an attorney who had worked with Michael Warren on business matters contacted them. He revealed that approximately a year before the murder, Michael had asked him a very strange question. If a husband kills his wife, what happens to the property registered in her name? Would it go to the husband? The attorney was surprised by this question, but advised Michael that if the husband arranged for an acquaintance to commit the murder and the court couldn't link the husband to the killer, he would inherit the woman's assets. Furthermore, the attorney shockingly advised Michael that if the murderer wore some kind of disguise, like a clown's, they would likely never be identified and thus escape punishment. Another shocking confession came from a man whose deceased father had worked for Michael at the time of the murder. He confessed that his father had helped carry out illegal plans for extra money, such as rolling back odometers to sell cars at higher prices. On the day of the murder, Michael asked his father to dispose of the gun and the car used by the murderer after abandoning the Chrysler in the parking lot. Before dying, the man's father revealed that the second car was hidden in a river canal. The police found the car in the canal, confirming the witness's truthfulness, although no evidence survived. Sheila's trial was repeatedly postponed until a final date was set for May 12, 2023. However, on April 25th, something unexpected happened. Sheila pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty she would have faced as she lost the murder trial. Her lawyer stated that Sheila was innocent of the murder, but feared for her life and thus accepted responsibility for someone else's crime. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison for second-degree murder, with about 5.5 years deducted for the time already served and further reduced for good behavior. She was expected to spend an additional 16 to 24 months in prison. As for Michael, his involvement has not been proven and he remains free. It's unlikely he will ever be charged with his wife's murder, as there is no direct evidence against him. Marlene's son, the sole member of his family, thanked the detectives for uncovering the truth and keeping the case alive for years. Despite the profound tragedy of his mother's death, he overcame his grief, opened his own small construction business, and rebuilt his life. The case of Danielle Jennings. Danielle Jennings was born on September 16, 1978, in Columbia, South Carolina, United States. She grew up in Stockton, Georgia, with her mother and stepfather. Known for her cheerful and outgoing personality, Danielle faced adulthood early. At the age of 16, she became pregnant but was determined to be a good mother. Danielle's relationship with Carl, the father of her child, ended in divorce. In 1996, she gave birth to her son Tristan. At the age of 17, and despite the difficulties ahead, Danielle was determined to provide the best life for herself and her son. Then she met Luis Payano, a man who would become Tristan's father. Danielle and Luis had known each other since they were teenagers, initially as friends, but their relationship developed into love. Luis took care of Danielle and Tristan, and for a time it seemed like all their problems had been solved. The couple moved in together, and Danielle secured an office job at a landscaping company, a position she was proud to have obtained. In December 1998, Luis proposed to Danielle, and she happily accepted. Her life was on the right track, with a loving son, a fiancé, and promising career prospects. On March 15, 1999, Luis returned home from work to find his fiancée, 20-year-old Danielle Jennings, lying lifeless on the bed in their Ashley Lakes apartment in Norcross, Georgia. Their young son, Tristan, was at daycare at the time. Luis immediately realized Danielle was dead due to her skin color and called 911. When the police arrived, Luis was waiting for them and reported what he had found. He explained that upon entering the apartment, he saw Danielle lying face down on the bed, and when he turned her over, he discovered she was dead. The police naturally suspected Luis, and they took him in for questioning while a team of officers thoroughly examined the crime scene. Danielle was found lying on her back on the bed, fully clothed with a sock around her neck. This suggested that the perpetrator intended to kill her, leaving no chance for survival. The fact that the stocking was tied at the back indicated that the perpetrator was behind Danielle when they strangled her. The crime scene showed signs of disarray, with the bed messed up and a dresser drawer open. It's possible that the perpetrator took the stocking from Danielle's drawer. The contents of her purse had been dumped and rummaged through, leading police to consider the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. However, several valuable items, including cameras and jewelry, were left untouched. This led police to speculate that the perpetrator may have intended to steal something but encountered Danielle and decided to kill her to avoid being identified as a witness. The lack of forced entry at the front door and the locked sliding glass door in the backyard raised suspicions that the crime scene might have been staged. Despite searching the surrounding area, police found no evidence. After investigating the crime scene, police discovered that Danielle may have let the killer into her home voluntarily, or that the killer had a key to the apartment. As a result, the prime suspect became Danielle's fiancé, Luis Payano. When police started questioning Luis, he displayed intense emotions. The police were aware that romantic relationships can sometimes escalate into anger, leading to devastating consequences. To begin the interrogation, they asked Luis about his whereabouts on the day of Danielle's death. Luis claimed he spent the entire day at work. He last saw Danielle when they both left their apartment at 6:45 a.m., but she returned briefly to retrieve something. According to Luis, Danielle was anxious about an important meeting with management at work and seemed slightly distracted. He also mentioned that Danielle called him at 11:30 a.m. to invite him to lunch, but he declined due to his heavy workload. Luis tried to contact Danielle later that day but couldn't reach her. Concerned, he called her co-workers, who told him she had gone out for lunch but failed to return to work. Luis then contacted their home, where he spoke to someone named Lisa, who also hadn't heard from Danielle. Luis left work to check on Danielle at their home in the Ashley Lakes apartments. When he arrived, he found something unsettling. The front door was unlocked. Upon entering, he saw a jar on the floor. During the investigation into Danielle's death, police questioned Luis about his relationship with her. They asked if the couple had frequent arguments or domestic problems. Luis insisted that their relationship was good and that they loved each other very much. Clearly feeling confused, he became frustrated with the questioning, believing that the police were wasting their time by focusing on him. He insisted that they should find the real culprit, who was still at large. Police also spoke to Danielle's friends and family, all of whom sided with Luis. Luis and Danielle were madly in love and were planning their wedding. However, their happiness did not last long. During the investigation into Danielle's case, Luis's co-workers confirmed that he had been at work all day, providing him with a solid alibi and eliminating him as a suspect. During the interrogation, Luis said that Danielle's co-worker Jeff was showing her too much attention and she was unhappy about it. The police immediately went to Danielle's workplace and spoke to her boss. Danielle's boss confirmed to the police that Danielle had complained about an employee named Jeff. Jeff was a middle-aged man who was a manager at the company. Danielle complained to her boss that Jeff was constantly hanging around her, interfering with her work, and behaving inappropriately. There was a significant age difference between Danielle and Jeff. He was 40 years old and she was 20. Jeff invited Danielle to lunch and Danielle told him that she had a fiancé. She refused to go to lunch with Jeff. The company where Danielle worked took her complaints seriously. On the day of her murder, she had a meeting regarding a complaint she had filed with management against Jeff. She was very nervous about it. She feared that her career might be in jeopardy because she was a new employee and Jeff was her manager. Her co-workers mentioned that Danielle had gone home for lunch after this meeting but had not returned. That gave the police a time frame for when Danielle's attack occurred. The investigation revealed Jeff's involvement, especially when it was discovered that he was absent from the office at the time of the crime and did not return until later in the evening. Police focused on Jeff as a suspect, possibly following Danielle home and attacking her when she opened the door, which would explain the lack of signs of entry. Jeff was called in for questioning and asked to describe his relationship with Danielle. He admitted that he invited her to lunch but denied his involvement in her death. Jeff didn't deny liking her. However, he claimed he had not behaved inappropriately towards Danielle and was surprised when she filed a complaint against him. The investigators asked him if Danielle's complaint was a reason for wanting to harm her. His first reaction to this question was anger. He was adamant that he wasn't the one who took her life. Jeff claimed that he couldn't have been the one who attacked Danielle because he had an alibi. According to him, he was with another colleague, and they were driving around the city solving some work issues. They had been together all day, so he couldn't be the one who took Danielle's life. Jeff told investigators the name of the coworker whom he claimed he was with at the time of the crime. The detectives met with this man, and he confirmed Jeff's words, Thus, they excluded another person from the list of suspects. The next day, investigators received the autopsy report and examined it in the hope of getting some clues that would help them track down the perpetrator. The cause of Danielle's death was asphyxia. It seemed evident that Danielle's attack had taken her by surprise. The investigators concluded that someone had come up to her from behind and pulled the stocking tight until she lost consciousness. After that, the perpetrator tied the stocking in a knot so Danielle could not regain consciousness. There were no defensive injuries on her body. In fact, there were no injuries at all except for the ligature mark on her neck. Perhaps Danielle didn't even see the face of the one who attacked her. The police found no evidence at the crime scene that could help identify the perpetrator. No shoe prints, no DNA, no fingerprints, no hair. There was no evidence to send to the laboratory for analysis. Since the police had no new suspects, they returned to the version that what happened was a robbery that went wrong. They asked Louise to go through the apartment with them again. He carefully examined everything and said that nothing was missing from the apartment. All the things seemed to be in their usual places. However, a few days later, Lou called the police and said he could not find Danielle's wedding ring. He also drew the attention of investigators to another strange detail. The stocking that someone strangled Danielle with did not belong to her. According to Louise, she didn't wear stockings at all. It meant that whoever had done it had brought the stocking with them. Lacking any evidence, the investigators decided to look into Danielle's past. Perhaps what happened to her was connected with her past. They asked her friends about her previous relationships, in particular, her relationship with Carl, the father of her son Tristan. Her best friend told the police about Danielle's ex-boyfriend Eddie. She started dating him when she was already pregnant. Eddie was a violent guy, and as their relationship progressed, he became more domineering and tried to control all aspects of her life. It got to the point where he forbade her to see her friends and family. The relationship with Eddie deteriorated even more after Danielle gave birth to her son. Soon after, Eddie started using illegal substances, and Danielle decided it was time to end this relationship. She moved out and tried to start a new life, but Eddie had other plans. He did not accept rejection and behaved unpredictably. As a result, Danielle had to seek a restraining order against him. He violated it several times, called Danielle, parked near her house, and once even showed up at her work. Danielle's family told investigators that Eddie had called her several times in recent months. He told her to meet with him, but she always hung up. Eddie was the perfect suspect, so detectives tracked him down and brought him in for questioning. The man was hostile, and he wasn't eager to go to the police station. However, Eddie had an alibi. He said that Eddie was towing cars out of state at the time of the murder and that Eddie's boss, along with service logs and other receipts, could back him up. When the police confirmed his alibi, they released Eddie. 3 days after Danielle died, Danielle's neighbor, Kirk, called the police and told them about something that had happened to Kirk the week before the murder. Ms. Kirk said that recently in the apartment complex, residents often encounter a maintenance worker. The maintenance worker said he came to do a repair order. However, Ms. Kirk said that she felt very uncomfortable the whole time he was there because he kept staring at Kirk as if he was more concerned with her than completing the repair order. The same thing happened to another woman. The maintenance worker insisted that he was there to change a light bulb when the landlord said there were no bulbs to change. He mumbled and staggered, "Maybe I have the wrong apartment," then backed up and walked away. Police investigations revealed that the complex had several maintenance workers, but the one who matched the descriptions of both women was Calvin Oliver, 42. According to records, Calvin had only started working at the complex in September 1998. At the time of Danielle's murder, 10 residents had reported cash, checks, and other valuables, including jewelry, computers, and guns, missing from their apartments without evidence of forced entry. Some even suggested that someone on the maintenance staff was responsible. Calvin Oliver was brought in for questioning by the police, who initially asked him about a series of burglaries at the Ashley Lakes apartments. Calvin denied any involvement in the burglaries. When asked about Danielle Jennings, he said he had heard about what happened to her but did not know her. The only thing he confessed was that he had worked in her apartment. The police were about to release Calvin for lack of concrete evidence when they ran a final check of Calvin's database. The results were horrifying. They discovered that Calvin had an outstanding warrant in another jurisdiction for failing to appear in court on a theft charge related to the theft of a personal check. According to Georgia Department of Correction records, Calvin had a long-standing adult criminal record dating back to 1974. His convictions included multiple residential burglaries, armed robbery, robbery by force, and at least one count of forcibly pressuring a woman into intimate contact at knife point. As a result, Calvin spent the majority of his life incarcerated. Given his extensive criminal history, it's surprising he was able to get a job at Ashley Lake's apartments. The police took Calvin Oliver into custody, which allowed them to thoroughly investigate his potential involvement in Danielle Jennings's death. As part of their ongoing inquiry into a string of thefts at Ashley Lake's apartments, the police obtained a search warrant for Oliver's apartment. During the search, they discovered stolen items from other residents, and the police discovered Danielle's wedding ring in his home. This discovery directly linked Oliver to Danielle's death. When the police questioned him about the wedding ring, Calvin claimed that he had stolen it about 3 weeks before Danielle's death. However, this claim was proven false. Calvin became a suspect and refused to cooperate with police after being caught lying. At trial, the prosecution argued that Calvin killed Danielle after she caught him breaking into her home. After a 5-day trial that ended on October 13, 2000, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. As a result, Calvin Oliver received a life sentence for the murder of Danielle Jennings and an additional 20 years for the burglary. A subsequent investigation revealed that Ashley Lake Apartments management knew about Calviner's history of run-ins with the law and his lengthy criminal record. Despite this knowledge, they failed to conduct thorough background checks and failed to warn other residents when a series of burglaries occurred. When these facts came to light, Danielle's family filed a lawsuit against Ashley Lake Apartments that they argue that the evidence demonstrates a reckless disregard for the safety of others. After a trial, a jury returned a verdict of more than $13 million for Danielle's wrongful death. The complex's key policy was also flawed, prosecutors said. Employees had access to house keys, and the lockboxes containing keys to the complex's 240 apartments were often left unsecured. Calvin Oliver is now serving a life sentence in prison. The story of Rachel Marie Runyon began on June 23, 1979, when she was born in the serene landscapes of Weber County, Utah, United States. She was the only girl in the family of Jeff and Elaine Runyon. The couple's firstborn was named Justin, and the youngest child was Nathan. The 3 siblings lived in harmony, promising laughter and shared memories. According to reviews of her life in 1981, Rachel, with her innate grace, the 2-year-old girl, ascended to the realm of childhood royalty by being crowned Little Miss Sunset. With her golden hair and radiant smile, she captivated attention at every local event. But little Rachel not only had physical beauty, her inner nobility was much greater according to her mother Elaine. She was a gentle and kind girl who was often seen on the periphery of playgrounds. She was extremely observant and analytical and knew how to stay away from the rough games between Justin and the other boys. She had the habit of sucking her thumb while observing the mischief of others. That gave her an even sweeter and also funny appearance, which aroused much sympathy. Her mother occasionally teased her about her future, predicting that she would have rabbit or beaver teeth, to which Rachel responded with a naughty giggle. The Runyon family chose to settle in Sunset, a community only about 6,000 inhabitants back then, which seemed a safe paradise to raise their children. Their modest home was located near the Doxey Elementary School playground. For the 3 little Runyons, that park became their place of laughter and fun. Trusting that they were doing their best for their children, Jeff and Elaine decided to install a gate in the fence of their own yard, opening a direct passage to the favorite place site of the 3 children. Despite the apparent tranquility of Sunset, Jeff and Elaine were always vigilant, tirelessly warning their children about the risks of trusting strangers. They insisted on the importance of staying in safe places and, above all, taught them never to follow someone unknown, no matter what they offered. Their commitment to their children's safety was unquestionable. In the late morning of August 26, 1982, 3-year-old Rachel, her brother Nathan, and the eldest 5-year-old Justin asked their mother for a simple request. They wanted her permission to go to the playground of Doxey Elementary School, less than 5 meters from their home. Although Elaine had always been cautious about letting her children play without her supervision, the proximity of the playground and the need to finish preparing lunch led her to agree to the request. As no precautions seemed excessive to her, the mother watched them from the kitchen window while preparing food. However, when lunchtime came around at approximately 12:55 p.m., only Nathan and Justin returned home. The voice of little Justin trembled as he told his mother what had happened moments before. He described how a young man had forcibly taken Rachel from the park. The man first attempted to lure all 3 children, promising ice creams and chewing gums from a nearby store. While playing in the open air, the man approached them, trying to persuade them to get into his car, claiming to have the gum-flavored ice cream they longed for. In hell innocence, Rachel mentioned her favorite ice cream flavor, and Justin, acting as the protective older brother, warned his sister not to pay attention to the stranger's offer. Then Rachel started to walk away, but the man was quicker, roughly grabbing and carrying her over his shoulder, silencing her screams as he took her to his vehicle. Justin and Nathan, paralyzed by fear, hadn't fully recovered when their mother called them to eat. Instantly, Elaine found herself in the midst of her worst nightmare. With her heart racing, she hurried to the store the man mentioned, questioning employees and shoppers with heartbreaking urgency. However, her inquiries yielded no results. No one remembered seeing Rachel or the man. 20 minutes after Rachel's disappearance, Elaine was at the Sunset Police Department, sporting the kidnapping. With immense distress, Elaine barely managed to speak, and the search for answers became a painful and uncertain journey. The Sunset Police acted promptly, initiating a plan involving vehicle checks around the city. Despite their efforts, the suspect was not apprehended, nor was Rachel recovered. With time pressing, a special team of 10 investigators from various law enforcement agencies in Utah gathered under the direction of Sheriff Brent Johnston, intending to solve the child's mysterious abduction. Descriptions provided by Justin and another 10-year-old child at the park gave investigators critical details. They described a light-skinned African-American man, around 30 to 35 years old, with distinctive afro hair and a marked mustache. He drove an old dark blue 4-door vehicle, embellished with wooden strips on the sides. This man had been seen in the park, interacting with various children and having a cup of coffee for at least 15 minutes before taking Rachel against her will. His strategy was to avoid immediate alarm and prevent children from screaming in his presence by engaging them in playful activities. The children's sharp memories allowed the police to create a detailed composite sketch. However, the 3 children were the only direct witnesses, as no security camera have recorded the incident in the school playground. Despite persistent calls by a police and the media, no one reported seeing a man with those characteristics. Subsequent efforts by the law enforcement agencies involved forensic analysis and rigorous door-to-door investigations supported by a committee of neighbors, many of whom offered monetary contributions for an improvised search. The Runyon family embarked on a heartbreaking journey to find their beloved daughter. With limited resources but unwavering will, both the family and the community volunteers launched various methods to find Rachel. A national flyer campaign displaying the girl's image was meticulously orchestrated, and friends and neighbors joined in a race against time, calming local neighborhoods in a frantic search. The case of Rachel Runyon saw thousands of missing person posters disseminated to raise public awareness regarding her disappearance. The public's response was overwhelming, providing investigators with myriad clues about Rachel's possible location and the potential identity of the abductor. Despite the determination in pursuing every lead, the outcomes were predominantly disheartening. A week after the harrowing disappearance, Rachel's parents, Jeff and Elaine, traveled to New York to attend a press conference with the intent to sustain media attention and emphasize the urgency of their daughter's return. Jeff, in a courageous plea, conveyed the profound damage the abductor had inflicted on their daughter and themselves, urging anyone with information to come forward. Elaine, with visible anguish, suggested the possibility of Rachel being sold after her abduction, and she appealed to potential adoptive parents to ensure they were not adopting her missing daughter. The family's relentless dedication was soon met with a harsh reality of mounting financial costs, reaching $10,000 in and postage expenses alone within 3 weeks. The long-term sustainability of such immense physical, emotional, and financial exertion was seemingly impossible. On September 3rd, the distressed parents brought their appeals to the Today Show, offering a reward of $20,000 primarily sourced from community donations, aiming to gather more information on Rachel's whereabouts. The community of Sunset demonstrated immense solidarity, contributing an additional $20,000 to the reward, totaling $40,000, a substantial incentive for Rachel's safe return at that time. The unexpected discovery on September 19, 1982, obliterated the enduring hopes of those searching for Rachel and left her loved ones heartbroken. A family traveling in Mountain Green, Utah, discovered the partially covered body of a small girl, later identified as Rachel, despite the advanced decomposition. The mystery surrounding her death persisted, as the exact cause remained undetermined, with asphyxiation not ruled out. Following the painful confirmation of Rachel's fate, Jeff and Elaine organized a proper farewell, attended by over 300 people. Rachel was finally laid to rest at the Washington Heights Memorial Park in Ogden, Utah. In the midst of devastation, Elaine transformed her pain into efficacy for child safety and legal improvements for child abduction, fostering awareness and change in a world that had brought her immeasurable sorrow. With her heart shattered but resolved unbroken, Elaine became a steadfast support, offering counsel, guidance, and solace to other parents, plunged into the turmoil of their children's disappearances. As accounts of this case highlight, Rachel's legacy surpassed her individual tragedy. Her kidnapping and the horrifying manner of her death echoed through the halls of power, serving as catalysts for substantial change. In October 1982, legislation was enacted at the federal level, granting parents of missing children access to an information exchange hub managed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. This hub began accumulating and archiving fingerprint and blood type records of over 300,000 children from Utah, aiming to forge an indispensable resource in combating child abductions. It may seem grim to assert that the agonizing loss of Rachel to an unapprehended abductor wasn't futile, but that is indeed the case. The state of Utah introduced the Rachel Alert System in April 2002, intended to notify residents about active child abduction and missing children cases. This system emerged as a ray of hope. It was only initiated when rigorous criteria were fulfilled, such as the child being a minor or mentally disabled, immediate danger, and not running away voluntarily. Detailed physical descriptions of the child were also mandatory. The Rachel Alert was activated only twice, during the disappearance of Elizabeth Smart in June 2002 and the kidnapping of Nicholas Triplett, a 3-month-old, in January 2003. Both children were eventually recovered alive. After Elizabeth Smart's safe return, realizing the efficacy of such alert systems, 41 states adopted the Amber Alert System, named for another girl, Amber Hagerman. In April 2003, Utah transitioned from the Rachel Alert to the Amber Alert System to comply with national standards. However, this didn't signify that the 3-year-old would be forgotten. To honor her memory, the Attorney General's office instituted the Rachel Runyon Award for citizens who aid in recovering a child by contacting the law enforcement when an alert is issued. Elaine was also invited to participate in the award ceremonies. Currently, the Amber Alert System undergoes testing twice a year in Utah on January 13th and August 26th, the dates marking the anniversary of Rachel's abduction. Although Rachel's murderer remains of large in the case unsolved, Lieutenant Phil Instead's vow that it will not be forgotten persists. Phil, the first to respond to Elaine's urgent call following her daughter's abduction, has continually supported the Runyon family. Over the years, he repeatedly reassured them of Sunset Police Department's unwavering commitment to find the individual responsible for Rachel's abduction and subsequent tragic death. In February 2007, the case was officially reopened, and the police have been collaborating closely with the Utah Attorney General's office in their quest to apprehend and bring the perpetrator to justice. At the time, a $58,000 reward was offered to anyone delivering information, leading to the arrest and conviction of the perpetrator. With the reward seemingly not alluring enough to elicit crucial information, Hopes of identifying the perpetrator are heavily dependent on substantial advancements in forensic technology since 1982. Strategies like the potential exhumation of Rachel's body to collect more evidence were also considered. In February 2007, DNA testing on items found near the location of the remains provided initial results but didn't significantly advance the investigation. Regardless of the hurdles and uncertainties, the Runyon family maintains hope that justice will eventually be served. The scope of suspects has varied over the years. In 2012, it was disclosed that Vasus was an inmate in a Pennsylvania prison, a former resident of Sunset in 1982. While no formal charges were levied against him, he was deemed a person of interest in relation to the little girl's kidnapping and homicide. Another potential suspect is a man with a criminal background located in New Mexico. Chief Cannaborn of Sunset Police has noted that evidence does point toward this individual's possible guilt, but it's currently inadequate for a formal arrest. Despite the obstacles, the quest for justice for Rachel is ongoing, and the resolve of her family and the authorities remains unyielding. In May 2016, the park, a silent witness to her abduction, was renamed Rachel Runyon Memorial Park. On August 26th, during a ceremony filled with emotion, it became a tangible tribute to the little girl's memory. Her commemorative stone, bearing her image and a brief recount of her story, stands within the park's boundaries, the engraving on the stone commemorating her short-lived life. This was not the only significant act in Rachel's memory. In March 2017, Rachel Runyon's Missing and Exploited Children's Day became law in Utah, aiming to emphasize child safety in the community annually, inspired by Rachel's story. In 2019, there was renewed hope in Rachel's case when private investigator Jason Jensen began working with the Runyon family. Jensen, co-founder of Utah's Cold Case Coalition, focused on a different crime from the 1970s. Witnesses in this unrelated case have provided incorrect information about the suspect's appearance, leading Jason to reconsider the descriptions given in Rachel's case. Specifically, he pondered if Justin, Rachel's brother, could have misinterpreted the racial identity of the abductor due to his young age and the predominantly white neighborhood they lived in, where interactions with African Americans were limited. Jason discussed with Elaine the possibility that Rachel's brother might have observed a Latino man abducting his sister. Justin never associated the abductor with being African American. He remembered him having a dark complexion and a distinct mustache with a gap or separation in the middle. The authorities, however, had prioritized the description provided by another older child present at the park that day. According to Jason, this misinterpretation possibly misdirected the investigation for almost 4 decades. Correcting this information brought the possibility of identifying a new person of interest, bringing the case closer to a possible resolution. Jason also provided more details about the suspect's car, a 1973 blue painted car with wood panels on the sides, allowing for more focused search efforts. Soon after the release of the updated sketch of the suspect, a woman came forward with a promising lead stating that her uncle, who had a history of sexual assault and abuse and was in and out of prison, resembled the sketch. He had been released from prison in 1981 and lived in the area at the time of Rachel's abduction, driving a blue painted car with wood panels, exactly like the one Jason thought was used in Rachel's abduction. However, he had passed away, so without a confession or DNA, there wasn't enough evidence to connect him to Rachel's murder. While the police allegedly took a DNA sample from his daughter to compare with the evidence collected in February 2007, the results have not been disclosed. Elaine, since the incident, has devoted her life and Rachel's legacy to preventing other children from suffering the same fate by educating children and parents about the dangers of abductions and crimes. Every year, on the anniversary of Rachel's abduction, her family holds small ceremonies at the park from which she was taken, now named after her. The case remains unsolved, and these events are used to urge the community to approach the Sunset Police if they have any information about her disappearance or the perpetrator's whereabouts. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.